The moment I held up that DNA test showing 0% genetic match to my entire family, watching my mother's face drain of all color, I knew my life was about to change forever. But when my sister Madison looked me dead in the eye and said, "I always knew you weren't really one of us," that's when I realized the kidney they wanted wasn't just about saving her life. It was about eliminating the only witness to their darkest secret. I'm about to tell you how a simple blood test at the hospital led me to discover I'd been living a lie for 23 years, and how I got the most satisfying revenge against the family who tried to harvest my organs to cover up their crime. But before I reveal how this all started, let me warn you, this story gets darker than you can imagine. My name is Jessica, and this happened 4 months ago. I'm using a throwaway account because, well, you'll understand why by the end. But I need to get this off my chest, because what they did to me, no one should ever have to go through this. Hey everyone, before we dive into this life-changing story, I need your help. This channel is brand new, and I'm putting my heart and soul into bringing you the most compelling real-life stories that need to be heard. If you're already feeling invested in this story, hitting that subscribe button, giving this video a like, and sharing it would mean the absolute world to me. It's completely free, but helps me keep creating these stories for you. And please, comment below if you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family. I have a feeling many of you will relate to what I'm about to share. Now, let's get into how my entire world fell apart. I'm 23 years old, and until 4 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was. Jessica Miller, the younger daughter of Diane and Robert Miller, little sister to Madison. I worked as a cardiac ICU nurse at Duke University Hospital, making $110,000 a year, though my family had no idea about my success. I lived in a modest apartment across town, drove a 2015 Honda Civic with 180,000 miles on it, and had managed to save over $65,000 while my family still thought I was barely scraping by. But looking back now, there were always signs. I just didn't want to see them. I have brown eyes and dark hair in a family of blue-eyed blondes. I'm 5 feet 2 inches while everyone else towers over me at 5 feet 8 inches or taller. I was always the one taking photos, never in them. When I got excited about something, they'd tell me I was too intense. When I succeeded at something, they'd find a way to redirect attention to Madison. When I needed comfort, they'd tell me I was being dramatic. But families come in all shapes and colors, right? I told myself that for 23 years. There was always this underlying current of otherness. Like I was a guest in their house who'd overstayed her welcome. Even as a child, I felt like I was auditioning for their love, never quite making the cut. My earliest memory is from when I was about 4 years old. Madison was 6, and we were at a family barbecue. All the adults were cooing over Madison's blonde curls and bright blue eyes, saying she looked just like a little angel and exactly like her mama. When they got to me, the comments were different. "Oh, Jessica's interesting looking. She must take after some distant relative." Kids change so much as they grow up. Even at 4, I could sense the difference in their voices. Madison belonged. I was interesting. My childhood was a series of small rejections that added up to a constant feeling of not being quite good enough. Madison got the lead in the school play. I got told the stage wasn't for everyone. Madison made honor roll. My A- average was perfectly fine for someone who tries their best. Madison broke something. It was an accident. I broke something. I needed to be more careful. But the medical differences were what should have been the biggest clue. Madison had perfect health, never even an ear infection. I had chronic issues, severe allergies that didn't match anyone else in the family, a food sensitivity to shellfish that no one else had, and blood work that always came back a little unusual, according to our family doctor. When I was 8, I had to get blood work done for a school physical. The nurse looked at the results, then at my parents, then back at the results. "Are you sure about the family medical history you provided?" she asked my mother. "Of course I'm sure," my mother snapped. "Why would you ask that?" "Oh, it's nothing major," the nurse said quickly. "Just some markers that don't typically align with the family history, but every family is different." I remember my mother gripping my hand tighter than necessary as we left that appointment. The moment that changed everything happened 15 months ago, on what was supposed to be my 22nd birthday. I'd been dropping hints for weeks about wanting to celebrate together as a family. Nothing big, just dinner and maybe a cake. I'd even offered to cook the meal myself. Madison had just moved back home after dropping out of community college for the third time, and I thought maybe this could be a fresh start for our family. I was still working as a patient care technician then, making $28,000 a year and struggling to pay for nursing school. But I'd saved up $200 to take everyone out to dinner, money I could barely afford to spend, but I was desperate to feel like I mattered to them. The morning of my birthday, I woke up to my phone buzzing with notifications. Madison had posted on Instagram, "OMG you guys, my parents surprised me with a weekend spa retreat in Nashville. Sometimes you just need to treat yourself, #blessed #family time." I ran downstairs in my pajamas, and there they were, loading suitcases into the car. All three of them. "Where are you going?" I asked, though my heart already knew. My mother didn't even look guilty. Madison's been stressed about her career situation. We thought a little getaway would help her reset. But it's my birthday. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison looked annoyed, like I was being inconvenient. My father checked his watch. My mother sighed like I was being dramatic again. "Jessica," my mother said in that condescending tone I knew so well, "you're 22 years old. Birthdays aren't that important anymore. Madison needs this right now." Madison needs this? I couldn't help myself. What about what I need? What about the fact that I've never, not once in my entire life, had a birthday celebration that was actually about me? Madison finally spoke up. "God, Jessica, you always make everything about yourself. This is exactly why no one wants to be around you." That's when something inside me broke. Not shattered, broke clean. Like a bone that's been fractured so many times it finally just snaps. I looked at these three people who shared my last name, who I'd spent 22 years trying to love, trying to please, trying to earn basic human decency from, and I realized something that should have been obvious years earlier. They didn't love me. They didn't even like me. Let me share 4 examples that perfectly capture what my childhood was like, because the birthday incident wasn't isolated, it was just the final straw in a lifetime of being treated like I was disposable. The Christmas morning incident. I was 8 years old. Madison was 10. That Christmas morning, I woke up excited because I'd been saving my allowance for months to buy Madison a friendship bracelet kit I saw her looking at in the store. I was so proud of that gift, wrapped it myself with paper I bought with my own money. Madison opened it, looked at it for exactly 2 seconds, and said, "This is cheap garbage." Then she threw it in the trash can right there in the living room. I started crying, not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears because my feelings were hurt. My mother's response? "Jessica, stop being so emotional. Madison didn't mean it that way. You're too sensitive." Then she handed Madison another present, a $200 American Girl doll I'd been asking for all year. When I asked why Madison got the doll I wanted, my mother said, "Madison is easier to shop for." You're so picky. But I hadn't been picky. I'd asked for one thing all year. One thing that went to my sister instead. Another was the high school graduation disaster. When I was 16 and Madison was 18, Madison graduated high school with a 2.8 GPA and no clear direction. I was a junior, but I'd been working twice as hard, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while working part-time at a grocery store to help pay for my own expenses. Madison's graduation party was a massive celebration. Our backyard transformed with string lights, catered food, and 30 of her friends. My parents spent over $1,500 on that party. They rented a photo booth, hired a DJ, bought her a brand new laptop as a graduation gift. The next year, when I graduated as salutatorian with a full scholarship to the local university, you know what I got? Dinner at Applebee's. Just the 4 of us. My mother's exact words were, "We already did the big celebration thing with Madison. We can't afford to do it twice." But here's the kicker, 3 days after my graduation, they bought Madison a car. A 2019 Nissan Sentra because she needed reliable transportation for community college. I was taking 2 buses and walking a mile to get to my job at the grocery store. How can I ever forget the medical emergency incident? This one still makes my hands shake. I was 21, working full-time while finishing my nursing prerequisites. I started having severe abdominal pain, but I couldn't afford to miss work, so I toughed it out for 3 days. Finally, the pain got so bad I couldn't stand up. I called my parents, begging them to take me to the emergency room. My mother's response: "Take some Tylenol and see if it gets better. We can't afford an ER visit right now." But that same weekend, Madison wanted to go to a music festival, and they handed her $400 cash without blinking. I ended up calling an Uber to the hospital, where I was diagnosed with appendicitis. I needed emergency surgery. When I called to tell them I was having my appendix removed, my father said, "Well, that's unfortunate timing. Madison's festival is this weekend." They didn't visit me in the hospital. Madison posted Instagram stories from the festival while I was recovering alone in a hospital room, wondering what I'd done to deserve a family who cared more about a concert than my life. The college fund theft happened when I was 20, and it's the one that really showed me their true colors. My grandmother, my father's mother, had been putting money into college savings accounts for both Madison and me since we were babies. When she died, she left each of us $15,000 specifically for education. I was careful with my money, using it only for tuition and books. Madison blew through hers in 6 months on clothes, restaurants, and a spring break trip to Cancun. When Madison decided she wanted to try community college again, she needed money for tuition. Instead of encouraging her to get a job or take out loans like any normal parent would, they came to me. "Jessica," my father said, "Madison really wants to turn her life around, but she needs help with tuition. You've always been the responsible one with money. Could you lend her some of your college fund?" Lend her. As if Madison had ever paid back a single dollar in her life. When I hesitated, my mother jumped in. "It's just money, Jessica. Education is important for both of you, and Madison is really motivated this time." I ended up giving Madison $8,000 from my college fund. She lasted 1 semester before dropping out again, this time because the classes were too early in the morning. I never saw that money again. When I asked about it, they acted like I was being petty. "Family helps family," my father said. "You don't keep score with people you love." But they kept score with me. Every favor, every sacrifice, every time I put their needs before mine, it was all tallied up in some invisible ledger where I was always in debt. That morning, watching them drive away to celebrate Madison's stress on my birthday, I made a decision that would change my life forever. I was done begging for their love. I was done making myself smaller so they could feel bigger. I was done apologizing for existing. I sat in that empty house for 3 hours, really looking at it for the first time. The walls were covered with photos of Madison's school pictures, dance recitals, family vacations where I was mysteriously absent from most shots. There were maybe 5 photos of me in the entire house, and in most of them, I was partially hidden behind someone else or cropped out of group shots. Even the refrigerator told the story. Madison's community college schedule, which she'd already stopped following, Madison's work schedule from a job she'd quit after 2 weeks, Madison's doctor appointment reminders. Nothing of mine. It was like I didn't exist. That afternoon, I called my academic advisor and asked about accelerating my nursing program. I applied for extra shifts at the hospital. I started looking at apartments I could afford on my own. But most importantly, I stopped trying to make them love me. I stopped volunteering for family dinners where I'd be ignored. I stopped offering to help with Madison's latest crisis. I stopped checking in to see how they were doing. And you know what? They didn't even notice. For 2 weeks, I barely heard from them. No calls asking where I was, no texts wondering why I hadn't come by. When Madison finally did contact me, it was to ask if I could cover her car insurance payment because she'd spent her money on a new iPhone. That's when I knew for certain I wasn't their daughter. I was their emergency fund. Their backup plan. Their designated problem solver for Madison's perpetual chaos. But I wasn't going to play that role anymore. I was going to build a life they couldn't touch, succeed in ways they couldn't diminish, and stop giving them the power to hurt me. I just had no idea that 14 months later, they'd try to take my kidney to cover up the fact that I wasn't even their family member to begin with. If you're finding this story as compelling as I hoped you would, please consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and sharing this with someone who needs to hear it. The support means everything to me and helps me know I'm on the right track with this content. And drop a comment if you've ever had that moment where you realized your family was the problem, not you, because what happens next in my story proves that sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones who hurt you the most. That birthday was my wake-up call, but the real escape began 2 weeks later when I made a decision that terrified me. I was going to finish my nursing degree early and get out of their orbit completely. I'd always been good at school, but I'd never pushed myself to my full potential because I was too busy trying to manage family drama and work enough hours to survive. But suddenly, with this new clarity, I threw myself into my studies like my life depended on it, because it did. I contacted my academic advisor, Mrs. Rodriguez, and laid out an aggressive plan: summer classes, overloaded semesters, and clinical rotations at hospitals 30 miles away where my family would never accidentally run into me. Mrs. Rodriguez looked at my transcript and said something that still gives me chills. "Jessica, you're one of the smartest students I've ever worked with." Why have you been hiding that? Why had I been hiding it? Because every time I'd shown intelligence or ambition at home, Madison would find a way to tear me down, and my parents would find a way to redirect attention back to her. I'd learned to dim my light so I would not shine the golden child. But not anymore. I quit my part-time job at the grocery store and found work as a night shift patient care technician at Regional Medical Center. The pay was better, $18 an hour instead of $12, and the hours worked around my class schedule. More importantly, I was finally in an environment where intelligence and competence were rewarded, not punished. My supervisor, David Chin, was the first adult who ever took a genuine interest in my potential. He worked his way up from tech to nurse to charge nurse, and he saw something in me that my own family never did. "You have natural instincts for this work," he told me after my first month. "You should be thinking about specializing. Intensive care, emergency medicine, maybe even nurse practitioner eventually." Nurse practitioner. Me. The girl who'd been told she was too sensitive for the real world was being encouraged to pursue advanced medical training. For the first time in my life, I had a mentor who believed in me. But the most important change wasn't professional, it was internal. I started setting boundaries with my family that I'd never had the courage to enforce before. When Madison called asking me to cover her car payment, I said no. When my parents invited me to Sunday dinner and I had studying to do, I didn't go. When they guilt-tripped me about abandoning the family, I reminded them that they'd abandoned me long before I stopped showing up. The pushback was immediate and intense. "Jessica's going through some kind of phase," I overheard my mother telling a neighbor. "She's been very selfish lately." Selfish. For the first time in my life, I was prioritizing my own needs, and they called it selfish. Working in the hospital opened my eyes to a world I never knew existed. Not just medicine, but the people who worked in medicine. Nurses who owned their own homes, took vacations to Europe, sent their kids to private schools. I'd grown up thinking we were poor, but I was starting to realize my parents had money. They just chose not to spend it on me. David introduced me to the concept of travel nursing. "You work 13-week contracts at different hospitals around the country," he explained. "The pay is incredible because they need experienced nurses willing to relocate quickly. A good travel nurse can make $100,000 to $150,000 a year, sometimes more. $150,000 a year. I was making $37,000 at my current job. But there was a catch: I needed experience first. Real hospital experience, not just tech work. And I needed to graduate. That's when David made me an offer that changed everything. I'm friends with the nursing director at Duke University Hospital. They have a program where exceptional students can work as graduate nurse externs while finishing their degrees. It's competitive, but I think you'd have a shot. Duke. One of the most prestigious hospitals in North Carolina. I applied that night, pouring everything into my application essay. I wrote about growing up in a family where I was overlooked, about how that had taught me to see patients others might miss, to advocate for people who couldn't advocate for themselves. 3 weeks later, I got the call. Not only was I accepted, I was offered one of only 5 spots in their intensive care extern program. The starting salary was $52,000 a year, more than I'd ever imagined making. And if I excelled in the program, they'd fast-track me for a full-time RN position upon graduation, with potential specialization training. For the first time in my life, I had a future that belonged to me. But I didn't tell my family about Duke. Something held me back every time I thought about sharing my success. Maybe it was all those years of having my achievements minimized or redirected to Madison's needs. Maybe I just wasn't ready to watch them find a way to make my success about her. Working at Duke was like stepping into a different universe. The hospital was massive, gleaming, filled with the kind of cutting-edge technology I'd only read about in textbooks. And I was good at it. Really good. My preceptor, Sarah Martinez, was a 15-year ICU veteran who didn't give praise lightly. But after my first month, she pulled me aside and said, "Jessica, I've trained over 40 nursing students, and I've never seen someone pick up critical care skills this quickly. You have a gift. A gift. Not too sensitive, not dramatic, not difficult. A gift." I threw myself into learning everything I could. I volunteered for the hardest cases, studied pathophysiology textbooks in my spare time, and slowly started building relationships with doctors who actually respected my input. Dr. Amanda Foster, one of the ICU attending physicians, started specifically requesting me for her patients. "You see things other people miss," she told me. "You catch changes in patients before the monitors do. You're going to be an incredible nurse." By month 3, I was handling patient loads that typically went to senior externs. By month 6, I was being consulted on complex cases by nurses with decades of experience. And here's the crazy part. I was making enough money to not just survive, but to start saving. Real money. By the time I'd been at Duke for 8 months, I had $15,000 in my savings account. More money than I'd ever had in my life. I started small upgrades to my apartment. Nothing flashy, a decent mattress, a coffee maker that didn't require percussive maintenance, clothes that actually fit properly. But for someone who'd spent 22 years wearing hand-me-downs and shopping at thrift stores, it felt like luxury. I was also starting to make friends. Real friends. Colleagues who invited me to happy hour, who remembered my birthday, who treated me like an equal. People who listened when I talked and asked follow-up questions about things I cared about. Jessica from Duke University Hospital was confident, competent, and respected. Jessica from the Miller family was the disappointment they barely tolerated. I started to understand that the problem had never been me. The problem was them. When I graduated nursing school and was offered a full-time position in the cardiac surgical ICU with a starting salary of $78,000 plus differentials, I cried in the parking lot. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I'd done it. I'd built a life they couldn't touch. My first day as a registered nurse, Dr. Foster pulled me aside. "Jessica, I want you to know that position in cardiac surgery is usually reserved for nurses with years of experience. You earned it through your work, your attitude, and your potential. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't deserve it. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't deserve it." If only she knew how much I needed to hear those words. But I still didn't tell my family. Some part of me was still that little girl desperate for their approval, afraid that if they knew I was successful, they'd find new ways to tear me down or make it about Madison somehow. So I kept my success secret, driving my beat-up Honda to family dinners, wearing clothes from Target, letting them think I was barely scraping by as a struggling new nurse. If only I'd known then that they were already planning to harvest my organs. Stories like this take incredible courage to share, and I want to bring you more of them. If you're invested in seeing how this turns out, subscribing, liking, and sharing tells me you want more content like this. Plus, you'll never miss the ending of these wild stories. And please comment below if you've ever felt like you were living a double life to protect yourself from toxic family members, because what I'm about to tell you about Madison's kidney disease will shock you to your core. Within 6 months of starting full-time at Duke, I was making $95,000 a year with overtime and shift differentials. Within a year, I was promoted to senior nurse and my salary jumped to $110,000. The other nurses started coming to me for advice. Doctors specifically requested me for their most critical patients. I was saving money at a rate I never thought possible. By the time this whole kidney situation started, I had $65,000 in my savings account, a 401k that was actually growing, and I'd even started investing in index funds. Dr. Foster had become not just a mentor but an advocate, introducing me to opportunities one never would have found on my own. She started talking about leadership development programs, about me potentially becoming a charge nurse within the next 2 years. You have the clinical skills, but more importantly, you have the emotional intelligence, she told me. You see patients as people, not just conditions. That's what makes great nurses into great leaders. I was living in a completely different world from my family, but I was still maintaining the facade that I was barely getting by. It became increasingly surreal. I'd spend 12 hours managing patients on mechanical ventilation, making life-or-death decisions, collaborating with some of the best cardiac surgeons in the country. Then drive to my parents' house and listen to Madison complain about how hard it was to find a job. I just don't understand why no one wants to hire me, Madison would whine while scrolling through her phone instead of actually job hunting. The job market is so unfair. Meanwhile, my mother would pat her shoulder sympathetically and glance at me. Jessica, you're lucky you found something stable, even if it doesn't pay much. Not everyone can find good work these days. If only she knew I'd just received a $5,000 bonus for my role in implementing a new patient safety protocol that reduced post-surgical complications by 23%. But there were moments when I almost cracked. Like when Madison announced she wanted to take a photography course that cost $800, and my parents immediately started discussing how they could make it work financially. Jessica, my father said, could you contribute $200 toward Madison's class? Family helps family. I had $47,000 in my savings account at that point. $200 was what I spent on groceries in a week. But instead of revealing my financial situation, I said I'd have to check my budget, then Venmo'd the money from my phone while pretending it was a sacrifice. Why? Because some part of me was still that little girl desperate for their approval, afraid that if they knew I was successful, they'd find new ways to tear me down. The cognitive dissonance of living two completely different lives started taking a psychological toll. At work, I was Jessica, the respected cardiac ICU nurse, who colleagues came to for advice and doctors trusted with their most critical patients. At home, I was Jessica, the family disappointment who couldn't even afford to help her sister pursue her dreams. I started having anxiety attacks on the drive to family dinners. My stomach would clench when my phone buzzed with texts from my mother, because I knew it would either be Madison needing money for something or guilt about not visiting enough. My colleagues at Duke started noticing the changes. You seem tense lately, Sarah mentioned during one shift. Everything okay at home? How could I explain that my family thought I was a failure while I was actually one of the top-performing nurses in one of the state's most prestigious hospitals? How could I tell them that I was lying to the people who raised me about the most important thing in my life? Family stuff, I said vaguely. You know how it is. But Sarah didn't know how it was, because Sarah's family was proud of her accomplishments. Sarah's family bragged about her career to their friends. Sarah's family didn't need her to stay small so they could feel big. The breaking point came during a particularly stressful shift when we lost a patient. A young father who'd come in for routine cardiac surgery, but developed complications we couldn't control. I'd worked on him for 6 hours, and his death hit me harder than usual. I called my mother on the way home, needing comfort, needing someone to acknowledge how hard my job was, how much I cared about my patients. That must be difficult, she said in a distracted voice. Oh, speaking of difficult, Madison's been really depressed about her job situation. Could you maybe take her out to dinner this week? She needs cheering up. That's when it hit me. They didn't see me as a person with my own needs, my own struggles, my own victories. They saw me as a resource to be deployed for Madison's benefit. I was literally saving lives, and they wanted me to take Madison out to dinner because she was sad about not having a job. As my guilt about keeping my success secret grew, I started finding ways to help my family anonymously. I told myself I was being generous, but really I was just trying to ease my conscience. When my father's car needed $1,200 in repairs, I mailed them a cashier's check with a note saying it was from his teacher's union emergency fund. I'd actually researched whether such a fund existed and created convincing paperwork to go with it. When my mother mentioned they couldn't afford to fix their leaking roof, I hired a contractor and had them bill it as a community improvement grant from a fictional local organization. I even created a website for the fake organization to make it believable. Madison wanted to take a 2-week vacation to Mexico with her friends, but couldn't afford it. I bought her the ticket through a travel agency and had them tell her she'd won a social media contest she didn't remember entering. Madison actually believed she'd won a contest by posting selfies. Looking back, I can see how messed up this was. I was literally funding their lifestyle while they continued to treat me like the family failure. But at the time, it felt like the only way I could contribute without opening myself up to their judgment or demands. The most ridiculous part was watching them accept these lucky breaks without question. My father literally said, "Good things happen to good people," when the roof got fixed. My mother shared on Facebook about how blessed they were to have such good fortune. Meanwhile, Madison posted dozens of Instagram photos from Mexico with captions about manifesting abundance and the universe providing, never once thinking to thank the sister she regularly called a disappointment. But the situation that really opened my eyes happened 9 months ago. Madison decided she wanted to start a cupcake business. Not because she was particularly good at baking, she wasn't. Not because she had any business experience, she didn't. Just because she thought it would be fun and easy money. She needed $5,000 for equipment and initial supplies. My parents didn't have it, but instead of encouraging her to get a job and save up like a normal person, they turned to me. "Jessica," my mother said during Sunday dinner, "we know money is tight for you, but Madison has this amazing opportunity. Could you maybe take out a small loan to help her get started? We'll pay you back once the business takes off." A loan. They wanted me to go into debt to fund Madison's fantasy business, while I was sitting on nearly $60,000 in savings. I told them I'd think about it. Then that week I anonymously purchased all the equipment Madison needed and had it delivered as promotional items from a restaurant supply company looking to build relationships with new businesses. Madison accepted the free equipment without question, spent 3 weeks half-heartedly making cupcakes that honestly weren't very good, then got bored and moved on to her next passion project. Hand-lettered inspirational quotes that she thought she could sell on Etsy. The equipment sat and used in their garage, $5,000 worth of professional baking gear collecting dust, while they continued to see me as the broke family member who couldn't even afford to help her own sister pursue her dreams. That's when I realized the truth. No amount of secret generosity would ever change how they saw me. I was their designated failure, and they needed me to stay in that role for their family dynamic to make sense. But I wasn't done enabling them yet. It would take one more massive betrayal to open my eyes completely. If you're as shocked by this manipulation as I was living through it, you're definitely part of our community. Subscribe to join others who appreciate these incredible real-life stories. Hit that like button if your jaw is on the floor right now, and share this with someone who needs to understand that sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in this situation, because what I did next changed everything. And trust me, you won't want to miss how this ends. 7 months ago, 2 months after the Mexico vacation I secretly funded, everything came crashing down. I was working a particularly intense shift in the cardiac ICU when my phone started buzzing with urgent messages. The first was from my mother. "Emergency family meeting tonight. Madison is sick. Need you home immediately." My heart sank. Despite everything, Madison was still my sister, and the thought of her being seriously ill terrified me. I requested to leave early and drove straight to my parents' house, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. When I walked into the living room, the scene was set like a tragic movie. Madison was curled up on the couch under a blanket, looking pale and weak. My parents sat on either side of her, their faces grave. The coffee table was covered with medical pamphlets and hospital papers. "Sit down, Jessica," my father said solemnly. "We need to talk." My mother's eyes were red from crying. Madison has been diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease. Her kidneys are failing rapidly, and she needs a transplant soon or... She couldn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Madison looked up at me with tears in her eyes, the first time I'd seen her show any vulnerability in years. "I'm scared, Jess. The doctors say my best chance is a living donor from a family member." The room fell silent as the weight of what they weren't saying settled over me. We've already been tested, my father continued. Your mother and I aren't compatible. The age difference and some health factors make us poor candidates. But you're young, healthy, and you're her sister. I felt like I was underwater, voices coming from far away. What exactly are you asking me to do? Donate one of your kidneys to save Madison's life, my mother said simply, as if she was asking me to lend her a car. The medical professional in me immediately started asking questions. What were Madison's creatinine levels? Had they explored all other treatment options? What were the long-term implications for a donor my age? How urgent was this really? But the family member in me was reeling from the casual way they'd presented this life-altering decision. I need time to think about this, I said finally. Madison's face immediately hardened. Time to think? I'm dying, Jessica. What is there to think about? Madison, I said carefully, this is major surgery. There are risks for the donor too. I need to research, talk to doctors, understand what I'd be getting into. What you'd be getting into? My mother's voice rose. You'd be getting into saving your sister's life. How's this even a question? That's when my father delivered the line that should have been my first clue something was wrong. Jessica, we've given you everything your whole life. Now it's time for you to give something back. Everything? They'd given me everything? I almost laughed at the audacity, but Madison started crying again, and my guilt overrode my anger. Okay, I said. I'll get tested. But I want to talk to her doctors myself, understand the full situation. The relief on their faces was immediate and absolute. Too immediate. Too absolute. Like they'd never considered the possibility I might say no. But what really struck me was something Madison said as I was leaving. I knew you'd come through, Jess. You always do what you're supposed to do. What I was supposed to do. Not what I wanted to do, not what I chose to do. What I was supposed to do. Like donating my kidney was just another family obligation, like covering Madison's car payment or buying her photography equipment. The next day, I called Madison's nephrologist, Dr. Patricia Williams, using my credentials as a cardiac ICU nurse to get detailed information about the case. What she told me was odd. Yes, Madison has polycystic kidney disease, Dr. Williams confirmed. But her progression is actually slower than we initially feared. She's looking at dialysis within the next 2 to 3 years, not months. And she's young and healthy enough that she'd likely do very well on the transplant waiting list. So this isn't immediately life-threatening? Not immediately, no. We have time to explore all options. Living donor transplantation is ideal, of course, but it's not urgent. I hung up the phone feeling confused. The way my family had presented it, Madison was dying and I was her only hope. But according to her own doctor, she had years, not months, and there were other options. Why the urgency? Why the emotional manipulation? I decided to get tested anyway, but something felt wrong. The compatibility testing took 2 weeks. During that time, I threw myself into research about kidney donation, living donor outcomes, and polycystic kidney disease progression. What I learned made me increasingly uncomfortable with my family's approach. Kidney donation is serious surgery with real risks. Recovery takes months. There can be long-term complications. And while most donors do fine, there's always a chance of problems. More importantly, I learned that family members aren't automatically the best matches. Compatibility depends on multiple factors, and sometimes unrelated donors are actually better matches than siblings. When my results came back, I was shocked. I was only a marginal match for Madison. Not a great match, not a perfect match, marginal. The kind of match that would work, but with higher risks for both of us. I called Dr. Williams again. I'm surprised about the compatibility results. I thought siblings were usually better matches. There was a pause on the line. Actually, Jessica, that's something I wanted to discuss with you. Your tissue typing results are unusual. Have you and Madison ever had genetic testing done? No, why? Well, the HLA markers suggest you might not be as closely related as we would expect for full siblings. It's not uncommon. Sometimes siblings just have very different genetic profiles. But it does make the transplant more complex. Not as closely related as expected. The words echoed in my head for days. Combined with a lifetime of feeling like I didn't quite fit in my family, It planted a seed of doubt that grew larger every day. I couldn't shake Dr. Williams' comment about our genetic compatibility. Combined with a lifetime of feeling like I didn't quite fit in my family, it planted a seed of doubt that grew larger every day. 3 weeks after getting my test results, I made a decision that would change everything. I ordered a 23andMe DNA test. I told myself I was just curious about my genetic health markers, wanting to understand potential medical risks before making a decision about donation. I wasn't trying to uncover family secrets. I just wanted information. The test kit arrived on a Tuesday. I spit in the tube, sealed the package, and mailed it back without really thinking about what I might discover. The waiting period was 2 to 4 weeks. During those weeks, my family ramped up the pressure. Madison started sending me articles about kidney disease, videos of transplant recipients thanking their donors, emotional posts on social media about the gift of life. My parents scheduled a family meeting with Dr. Williams to discuss next steps, assuming I would move forward with donation. They'd already started talking about surgery dates, recovery timelines, and how I'd need to take extended time off work. The assumption that I would sacrifice my body for Madison, without question, without hesitation, started to feel suffocating. But every time I tried to express concerns or ask for more time, I was met with emotional manipulation. "I can't believe you're making this about yourself," Madison said when I mentioned wanting to get a second opinion. "I'm the one who's dying." "Jessica," my mother added, "this is what love looks like. This is what family does for each other." But as I watched them plan my surgery and recovery without asking what I wanted, a terrible thought kept creeping into my mind. When had they ever done anything like this for me? On a Thursday evening, exactly 3 weeks and 4 days after mailing my DNA sample, I got the notification that my results were ready. I was working a night shift at the hospital, and it was a relatively quiet evening in the ICU. I stepped into the family consultation room, closed the door, and opened the 23andMe app on my phone. What I saw made me sit down hard in the chair. Under DNA relatives, there were dozens of matches. Close relatives, distant cousins, third and fourth connections spreading across the screen like a family tree I'd never seen before. But there were 3 names conspicuously absent from that tree: Diane Miller, Robert Miller, and Madison Miller. My hands shaking, I scrolled down to the detailed breakdown. Genetic relationship to uploaded family members: 0%. 0%. Not 25% like a half-sibling. Not 12.5% like a cousin. 0%. I wasn't related to any of them. Not even a little bit. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The most shocking part was the name at the top of my closest matches, Carol Smith, listed as possible mother, 49.7% DNA shared. Carol Smith was very much alive, living in Virginia, and according to her profile, she'd been searching for a missing daughter named Sophia Marie Smith for 23 years. I clicked on her profile with trembling hands. The information there made my blood run cold. Still searching for our daughter Sophia, born March 15, 2001, taken from Virginia General Hospital Nursery on March 17, 2001. If you have any information about baby trafficking or illegal adoptions from Virginia hospitals in 2001, please contact us. We have never stopped looking for you, baby girl. March 15, 2001. My birthday. Virginia General Hospital. The hospital listed on my birth certificate. March 17, 2001. 2 days after I was born. I wasn't Jessica Miller. I was Sophia Marie Smith. And I'd been stolen from my real parents as a newborn. Thank you so much for still staying with me through this incredible and heartbreaking journey. Stories like these show us the importance of trusting our instincts and questioning what we're told, even by family. If this story is moving you, subscribing means everything to me and helps me continue bringing these powerful stories to light. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to know the truth about their identity. Share this story with someone who might need to hear it, and please comment below with your thoughts. I read every single one. Because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. I drove straight from the hospital to my parents' house at 2:30 in the morning. I didn't call ahead. I didn't plan what I was going to say. I just knew I needed answers, and I needed them immediately. I used my key to let myself in and found them all in the living room. My parents and Madison watching late-night television like a normal family. A family I now knew I'd never actually been part of. "We need to talk," I said, holding up my phone with the DNA results displayed. The change in the room was instant. My mother's face went white. My father's jaw tightened. But Madison looked annoyed, not surprised. "Where did you get that?" my mother whispered. 23andMe. Turns out I'm not related to any of you. Not even a little bit. Care to explain? The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Finally, my father spoke. "Jessica, sit down. This is complicated." "No," I said. "I'm done sitting down and being told what to think. I want the truth. All of it. Right now." That's when my mother broke. "Your real parents were drug addicts," she sobbed. "They couldn't take care of you. We saved you from that life." "My real parents," I said, my voice deadly calm, "are Carol and David Smith from Virginia. They've been searching for their missing daughter Sophia for 23 years. I found them. They're not drug addicts. They're a teacher and a nurse who filed a missing persons report when I disappeared from their hospital nursery." Madison finally spoke up. "I always knew you weren't really my sister." "You knew." I turned to stare at her. "You knew I was stolen from another family, and you let me grow up thinking I was just the disappointment daughter?" "We didn't steal you," my father said defensively. "My sister worked at that hospital. She told us about a baby who needed a home." "Your sister was part of a baby trafficking ring," I said, the pieces clicking together. "I researched her after finding the Smiths. She was arrested 5 years ago for her role in stealing newborns from hospital nurseries and selling them to families who couldn't adopt legally." The room fell silent again. "And now," I continued, "you want me to give up my kidney to save the life of someone who isn't even my sister, to people who stole me from my real family." Madison's mask finally slipped completely. "You showed up, didn't you?" she said coldly. "You've had a good life here. We fed you, clothed you, gave you a family. The least you can do is help me now." That's when I realized the most horrible truth of all. They'd always known this day might come. They'd raised me knowing I might be needed as a medical backup for their real daughter. "Is that what this is about?" I asked, my voice getting louder. "You kept me around as spare parts for Madison?" "Don't be dramatic," my mother said, but her voice was shaking. "We loved you like our own." "No," I said. "You kept me like a pet. Fed me just enough to stay alive, gave me just enough attention to keep me obedient. But I was never your daughter. I was your insurance policy." That's when I pulled out my phone again and hit record. "Say that again," I said. "About how you saved me from drug addicts. Tell me again how lucky I should feel." "Stop recording," my father demanded. "Tell me about your sister's baby trafficking ring. Tell me about how you paid her to steal me from the hospital nursery." "Turn that off," my mother said. "Tell me about how you raised me to be Madison's backup kidney donor." "We never," my father started. "You absolutely did," Madison interrupted him. "Stop pretending this wasn't always the plan. She was supposed to be my genetic match, and when she wasn't, you figured she'd be grateful enough to do it anyway." The silence that followed was deafening. I had everything I needed. I left that house and drove straight to a 24-hour diner, where I sat in a corner booth and called Carol Smith. It was 4:30 in the morning, but she answered on the second ring. "Is this Sophia?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I think so," I whispered. "I think I'm your daughter." What followed was the most emotional conversation of my life. Carol and David Smith had been searching for me for 23 years. They'd hired private investigators, worked with the FBI, never given up hope that someday they'd find me. "We knew you were alive," Carol told me through tears. "A mother knows." We never stopped looking. Within 6 hours, she and David Smith were on a plane to North Carolina. Within 12 hours, I was having the most emotional reunion of my life with parents who had never stopped loving me, never stopped hoping I was alive somewhere. They brought photo albums spanning 23 years. Baby pictures of me that I'd never seen. Hospital bracelets from the day I was born. Letters they'd written to me every year on my birthday, hoping someday I'd be able to read them. "We have your room exactly as we left it," David told me. "We always believed you'd come home." But the most incredible part was meeting my siblings. I had two biological siblings, a brother named Michael who's now 25 and a veterinarian, and a sister named Emma who's 21 and studying to be a teacher. They welcomed me back like I'd never been gone. Emma had been too young to remember me, but she'd grown up knowing she had a missing sister. Michael remembered me as a baby and had never stopped asking when I was coming home. I always felt incomplete, Emma told me. Like part of our family was missing. Now I know why. The genetic similarities were undeniable. I had David's eyes and Carol's smile. I was left-handed like Michael. I had the same rare blood type as Emma. All the things that had never made sense with the Millers suddenly made perfect sense with the Smiths. But more than the physical similarities, it was the emotional connection. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. These people cared about my thoughts, my dreams, my fears. They wanted to know everything about the 23 years they'd missed. "We're so proud of the woman you've become," Carol said. "Despite everything, you turned out to be exactly the kind of person we hoped you'd be." Proud. They were proud of me. Not disappointed, not demanding, not manipulative. Proud. Within a week of our reunion, the FBI was investigating my case. The evidence was overwhelming. My DNA matched to the Smiths, the missing persons report filed 23 years ago, the recorded confession from the Millers, and the connection to Robert Miller's sister's baby trafficking ring. The Millers were arrested on charges of conspiracy to commit kidnapping, child trafficking, and fraud. Robert's sister, already in prison for her role in the trafficking ring, provided additional testimony in exchange for a reduced sentence. The trial made national news. "Stolen Baby Reunited with Family After 23 Years" was the headline that appeared in newspapers across the country. I testified about my childhood, the recorded confession, and the attempted organ harvesting. During the trial, more victims came forward. It turned out Robert's sister had been stealing babies from hospital nurseries for over a decade, selling them to families who couldn't adopt through legal channels. The Millers had paid $75,000 for me in 2001. Madison's reaction to the arrests was perhaps the most telling. She posted on social media about being the real victim in the situation, claiming I was destroying her family for attention. She started a GoFundMe for her legal defense, describing herself as an innocent daughter caught in the crossfire. It raised $300. The Millers were ultimately sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for their role in the trafficking ring and conspiracy charges. They'll likely serve 5 years with good behavior. Madison? She's fine. Her kidney disease is real, but as Dr. Williams had originally told me, it's not immediately life-threatening. She's on dialysis now, waiting for a kidney from the official transplant list like thousands of other patients. Her doctors expect her to do well, and she's young enough to be a good candidate for transplantation. She sent me one final message through a mutual acquaintance after the sentencing. "I hope you're happy ruining our family." My response was simple. I didn't ruin your family. I escaped it. But the most satisfying part of the resolution wasn't the legal justice, it was the personal transformation. I'm Jessica Smith now, not Jessica Miller. I kept the first name because it's who I became, but I took my real family's surname. I moved to Virginia to be closer to my biological family and got a position at Virginia Commonwealth University Medical Center in their cardiac surgery program. The salary is $125,000 a year, and I'm working toward becoming a nurse practitioner specializing in cardiac care. My real parents are incredible people who spent 23 years and their entire savings searching for me. They never gave up hope. They have photos of me as a baby clothes they kept, a room they maintained exactly as they'd left it the day I disappeared. Carol is a high school English teacher who always wondered if her missing daughter inherited her love of reading. David is a registered nurse who works in pediatric oncology, fighting for children the way he wished he could have fought for me. They've supported my career in ways the Millers never did. When I told them about my goal of becoming a nurse practitioner, they researched programs and helped me apply for scholarships. When I had a difficult day at work, they listened without trying to make it about someone else's problems. For the first time in my life, I have parents who are proud of my accomplishments, who brag about me to their friends, who see my success as their success. Thank you so much for staying until the end of this incredible journey. Stories like these show us the importance of trusting our instincts, standing up for ourselves, and never giving up hope that justice will prevail. If this story moved you, subscribing means everything to me and helps me continue bringing these powerful stories to light. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to know the truth about their identity. Share this story with someone who might need to hear it, and please comment below with your thoughts. I read every single one. Hit that notification bell too, because trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Until next time, remember, you are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, even if they call themselves family. Sometimes the greatest act of love is loving yourself enough to walk away.